All right, so today we're going to look at the art and science of the X-ray, but we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to treat it like a professional photo shoot. So forget everything you know about a hospital waiting room. Think of this as a studio session. And the goal? To get the absolute perfect picture of a skeleton while it's still inside a living person.
So, that's the big question, right? How do you actually do it? It seems kind of impossible. I mean, you can't just tell someone to hold still and think bony thoughts. Taking a crystal clear picture of what's inside a living, breathing person, well, that is a very precise craft. So let's break down how it's done.
You know, the secret is to treat it almost exactly like a professional photographer would. It all comes down to three things. First, getting the pose just right. Second, using a very specific language to frame the shot. And third, dialing in the absolute perfect camera settings. You get those three things right, and you've got a perfect image.
Okay, first up, the pose. Before you even think about touching the camera, you have to get your subject positioned correctly. You know, in any photo shoot, consistency is key, right? You want every photo to be comparable. Well, in medical imaging, that consistency isn't just helpful, it is absolutely critical for a doctor to make an accurate diagnosis.
And this standard pose, it's got a name. It's called the anatomical position. Think of it as the universal default setting that everyone in the medical world agrees on. This is what makes sure a doctor in Tokyo is looking at a chest X-ray in the exact same way as a doctor in Toronto. It totally eliminates any guesswork about how the patient was standing.
So, what does this pose actually look like? Well, there are 4 simple rules. First, the body is standing straight up. Second, the arms are just hanging naturally by the sides. Third, and this is the kind of weird part, the palms have to face forward. And finally, the eyes are looking straight ahead with the feet parallel. This very specific stance, it's the foundation for everything else we're going to do.
Okay, so our subject is in the standard pose. As the photographer, what's next? Well, now you've got to frame the shot. Are you taking a profile picture, a head-on portrait, or maybe a top-down view?
In radiography, all this framing is done using something called anatomical planes. Now, the concept is pretty simple. They're just imaginary flat surfaces that slice right through the body, giving us a clear, two-dimensional view of a three-dimensional person.
First up is the sagittal plane. I want you to imagine a sheet of glass dropping down vertically and dividing the body into left and right halves. A view along this plane, that's your classic profile picture, a perfect side view shot. And this is essential for things like checking the curvature of the spine. Next, we have the coronal plane. This time, our imaginary sheet of glass divides the body into front and back sections. This gives you that face-on view, just like a standard passport photo. In fact, it's also called the frontal plane for that exact reason. This view is fantastic for comparing structures on the left and right, like your lungs or your kidneys. And finally, there's the transverse plane. This one's horizontal, and it cuts the body into upper and lower portions. Think of this as the bird's eye view, as if you were looking straight down from above. So, altogether, these 3 planes, sagittal, coronal, and transverse, give radiographers their complete compositional toolkit. All right, we know how to pose our subject and how to frame the shot, but now we need a really precise way to talk about what we're seeing. We need a specific language to describe exactly where things are, because, well, a little to the left just is not going to cut it. Let's start with forward and backward. It's easy. Anterior means towards the front of the body, and posterior means towards the back. So, in our photo shoot, asking someone to face the camera, that would be an anterior view. Simple as that. Next up, let's cover up and down. Superior means towards the head, or just above another structure. Inferior means towards the feet, or below. So, for example, your nose is superior to your chin, and your knee is inferior to your hip. Make sense, right? And finally, let's talk about how close things are to the body's core. Proximal means closer to the trunk, while distal means farther away. For example, your elbow is proximal to your wrist because it's closer to your shoulder, but your fingers, they're distal to your wrist. It's all about relationship and location. So we've got the pose, the framing, and the language. Now for the really technical part, adjusting the camera settings. You know, in photography, you're always balancing things like aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Well, in radiography, you have a different but just as important set of dials you have to get right. There are 3 main settings to master. First is something called MAS. This controls the overall brightness of the image. Think of it like your main exposure dial. Second is KV, which controls the power of the X-ray beam itself. This is what determines the image contrast. And finally, there's FFD,
the focus film distance. This is basically just like how close your camera is to the subject. Getting this technical trio right is, well, it's everything.
And here's a fantastic example of what happens when those settings are off. If your MAS is too low, the image isn't just dark, it gets filled with this kind of digital noise. It's technically called quantum mottle, but it's exactly like taking a photo in a really dark room and getting that grainy, fuzzy, unclear picture.
Okay, we've taken the shot. The final step in any photo shoot is to look at the developed picture and judge its quality. Is it clear? Is it sharp? And most importantly, is it actually useful for a diagnosis?
After all that work, the posing, the framing, the technical settings, the quality of that final image really boils down to two absolutely critical factors. First, you need good contrast. This is just the visible difference between the light and dark areas. High contrast is what allows a doctor to clearly see the outline of a bone against the muscle around it. Without good contrast, important details just kind of blend together into a gray fog.
And second, you need high spatial resolution. This is all about sharpness and fine detail. It's literally the difference between seeing the crisp, sharp edge of a bone versus a fuzzy, blurry outline. High resolution is absolutely critical for spotting tiny things like hairline fractures.
And of course, there are a few common problems that can ruin a perfect shot. Distortion can make a bone look longer or shorter than it really is. Unsharpness, which often comes from the patient moving just a little bit, creates motion blur. And noise, which we saw earlier, can hide crucial details in a sea of random speckles.
You know, this quote really sums it all up. The goal of a great X-ray isn't just to create a good-looking picture. The goal is to create an image that is, as it says here, fit for purpose, meaning it provides a clear and accurate window into the human body so a doctor can make a diagnosis.
So from the standard pose all the way to the final check for contrast and resolution, taking an X-ray really is an art form. So the next time you happen to see one, maybe you won't just see bones. Maybe you'll see the careful posing, the precise framing, and the perfect settings that were all dialed in to make the invisible visible.